Welcome to Rich Conversations. We have another great episode here. We are talking to Chris Hall, who's all the way in Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you introduce yourself real
Yeah.
quick?
My name is Chris Hall. I'm a photographer from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm currently going to school for photography. I lived in Baltimore for off and on my first 2 years, but 3 years fully if you count my time in dorms. It's a They say it's the greatest city in America on the park benches, and it's a interesting place to live.
Yeah, well, Chris has some great photos. You guys got to check out his photos. We'll get to that a little bit later, but what it what's the general vibe of Baltimore?
Um, I would say Baltimore has a lot of different vibes. It just depends on what area you're in. There's the vibe that is often portrayed on the news as this crime-ridden Gotham-like city,
Yeah.
versus real Baltimore, which is filled with lots of culture, interesting people, arts, food. We're a food city. It's got all different quirks and places. I kind of see it as like this untapped city. While you can go to New York City, DC, Philadelphia, all cities close to around my area, not many seem to go to Baltimore. And if they do, it's to just go to the aquarium, but to genuinely experience Baltimore, there's so much to it. It's very complex
How
place.
uh how far is Baltimore to DC?
I think, well, you can get to the exterior of DC area, probably 30, 40 minutes or so.
Okay,
Drive.
so it's really close.
Yeah.
Um, what are the people like in Baltimore?
Um, I would say it also depends on the area we live in. Baltimore, while it is a city with a really complex history, just depends on the area. And there's some great people. There's maybe some questionable people.
Okay, break down like the areas or the neighborhoods.
So, where I currently live in Bolton Hill, it's more of this artsy neighborhood that was revitalized to be a community of artists, and from there you can move over to city little towns like Hamden, which are these exterior towns around Baltimore. But you can move deeper down to areas by the water. You have Fells Point and Canton. There's the Inner Harbor. Those are kind of the areas that I would say a lot of people visit when they come to Baltimore. I like to photograph abandoned places, and through that, I have explored a lot of the other areas of Baltimore that not many people visit, but are home to some great people and great things to do. Um, One of my favorite areas to hang out and photograph by the water is Dundalk. It's this very industry driven sector of Baltimore, and it's where the ports are. Baltimore is a big port city, and that's one of my favorite little areas. But there's so many different towns, that little communities that make up Baltimore. It's hard to list all of them.
Yeah.
We're a bay city, so we're surrounded by, or the water. The city surrounds the water.
Yeah.
Is the way to put it, I guess.
So so okay, I have to ask this.
Mhm.
You've seen The Wire?
I have. I've seen a few episodes of it. It's been a
Okay.
while since I've watched the entirety of it, but I have seen The Wire.
Okay.
A lot of the areas they filmed in are within like a 5-10 minute drive from where I live.
Okay, wow. That's probably the like most I know about like Baltimore,
Mhm.
like the impression of it, and also like the sports teams like the Ravens, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. It's like it feels it feels like it's not taken as seriously as like DC. I mean, DC is the capital, but it's like in that what like mid-Atlantic area, like
I
Arlington and all those cities.
Yeah. Um, I mean, Baltimore used to be a pretty major city. It's had its population declining over the years. People moving out to other places and things. And I think in its heyday, it definitely had its probably bigger reputation as a city. And then since so fewer population currently resides
Yeah.
here, it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
But
But
I
you
think,
you enjoy it though?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely has its quirks and things. But living in Baltimore has been an experience to say the least. I've learned a lot about different people and things like that. And there's a lot of history to this city. Edgar Allan Poe and people like that. There's a graveyard where the creator of the Ouija board is buried.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and he has a headstone with the Ouija board on it. John Wilkes Booth is also buried here.
Okay.
Is this a lot of little things like that that you might not know about? But when you dive deeper into Baltimore, its city and history, there I've found a lot of interesting things, I'd say.
Do you know much about Edgar Allan Poe?
Um, I mean, I've read some of his poems throughout school. I'm not a super big like Edgar Allan Poe buff, I would say,
Yeah.
compared to some people I know.
I'm looking up Baltimore right now. I'm curious about the establishment date. Let's see.
Should be, I think it's 1729.
Yeah, this should be
Baltimore
a
was
lot.
founded.
1729. That's a long time. Yeah, 1729. Wow. Yeah, so there's so much history there. Are there a lot of like cobblestone streets and things like that?
Yeah. One thing that they did do is they have paved over a lot of them, but there are a good many down in the Fells Point area. Once you go down by the water in the old historic towns, they've tried to keep us a good bit of the cobblestone.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like a neat town.
Yeah, there's so much to do here. I mean, we have things from like an aquarium to any type of restaurant you could think of, and it's art museums. Yeah, there's parks and
You said it's a foodie town, right?
yeah, and I honestly didn't really know that when I first came to Baltimore.
Okay.
When I first started college, 2018. It wasn't really till I actually started working in the restaurant industry over the past summer that I kind of got to experience like the food life in Baltimore and how prominent that was.
What are some of the main dishes that Baltimore serves?
Yes.
What are some of the main dishes Baltimore serves?
Main dishes. I would say there's a lot of like there's a lot of chicken sandwiches I've noticed.
Okay.
There's a lot of
Okay.
places with different chicken sandwiches, which is like I don't know if that's a thing now also, but I mean, we also are known for since we're by the bay, there's crabs and everything has Old Bay on it and seafood and
Yeah.
things like that, I would say.
Yeah. You were working service industry this last summer?
Yeah, I currently work at this restaurant called Bond House Kitchen. I started there as just a support staff, kind of bussing tables, and then I eventually now work as the social media manager for them. So I manage their Instagram, take pictures, and advertise and help make sure they bring in business.
Yeah, I bartend on the weekends at a place here in Chicago. Working in service industry, you learn so much. What are some of the things that you've learned or kind of didn't know before, but now you're kind of like aware of, and it changes kind of how you operate?
Um, I would definitely say how I interact with people. I'm pretty introverted, and then that as a photographer during the pandemic, I used to do a lot of event coverage, and I still do like real estate and stuff like that. But the pandemic just straddled my business so much that I had to go find another source of income, and through that, working in the service industry. I'd say there's a lot of like background things that you don't know, like the amount of prep that goes into a restaurant, what you don't see when you're eating,
Mhm.
um, having to order food and make sure everything's in stock, and
Yeah.
the behind the scenes of the experience of eating out is was so much more complex than like had ever thought to begin with.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, okay. So you've been in Baltimore for a little while now. What would you say, and you've experienced different neighborhoods and people. What what do you think? Well, first, what are people of Baltimore called? Like, what do they call themselves?
Um, I mean, I don't know if they really call themselves anything. I mean, there's Baltimoreans, I
That's
guess,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like we're
but
Chicagoans over here.
yeah,
Okay.
that I don't really hear that too often, I'd
It's a
say.
little clumsy, I would say.
Yeah.
So what do you think they care most about?
The people of Baltimore.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say I'm not really one to be able to really speak on that since I'm not from Baltimore.
Uh-huh.
But I would say one thing that from my time living here that I've noticed is change and kind of the
Okay.
portrayal of Baltimore as a city. Because I mean, you look on Google and 10 articles will say Baltimore is the most dangerous city in America and all the violence and things like that. And while there are things that do occur in the city, I would say it's not the holistic representation of Baltimore.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's one really big thing that a lot of people in Baltimore look for. Uh, it's just the representation of Baltimore as more than just a crime city.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always so then you said that you said change, like change
Mhm.
in the city.
Yeah,
What exactly do you mean by that? Is that like the revitalization and
I would say so.
okay.
There's a lot of old buildings and areas in Baltimore, and Johns Hopkins is a major component in the city, and they own a lot of area and land of the city. And I think just change in a way that brings communities together rather than tearing them apart and pushing others out is
Mhm.
something that a lot is on the mind of people.
Yeah, I could see that. Seems like that's a more of a it's a good trend in cities where you're taking like a more buildings that aren't being used and artists are able to contribute to it, and it opens up the space for all kinds of people to interact and build community. um so I imagine, yeah, Baltimore's right up there doing that. I
Yeah.
could imagine, yeah. All right, what sounds, sights, and smells are recognizable in the city?
Definitely the smell of the Chesapeake Bay on
Yeah.
a hazy day. It has a very particular smell of rot, some fish. That's more so when you're down by the water. Sights and sounds also, I would say the railroad. Um,
Mm,
I personally live by a couple train tracks and they run all throughout the city, and hearing a train at some point is almost unavoidable. But not as unavoidable as our helicopters. We have
Helicopters.
one to two helicopters that the Baltimore Police Department fly around our city to survey the city almost 24/7. They spend thousands of dollars, and if you're lucky at night, you might get spotlighted by one of the helicopters
Really?
passing through. Yeah. Um, I haven't looked too much into it, but they literally spend tens of thousands of dollars to keep these helicopters in the air, looking over Baltimore as a way, I guess, in their eyes to deter crime.
Huh.
Um, so
That's interesting. I've never
yeah,
heard that.
you can see them most times around sometimes at night you might get waken up by the helicopters flying around. It's something that I would say exists, but maybe a sound that could one day not. um, that idea,
Yeah, that sounds really disruptive, I would imagine.
yeah, it definitely gives the city like its big brother watching over you, essentially,
Wow.
many aspects.
Huh. That
But
is, I didn't know that. Interesting.
yeah, it's definitely
Wow. I would not think that. Interesting. It's um okay. So if someone had a few days to spend in Baltimore and the area, what would you recommend them doing?
well, I guess it would depend like what experience they wanted at Baltimore.
Okay, that's makes sense.
I would say some of my favorite areas to see are the Peabody Library. It's this historic
Oh,
library in Baltimore that the architecture inside is just absolutely incredible. Words can't really describe how incredible this library is, but they do visits and you can go in and see all the old original books from this collection. And you can even look at them in the library. You can't check them out, but they
yeah.
do allow viewing of the books. Um, I would say from there, I would definitely spend the night out in Fells Point. There's a lot of restaurants and bars down there. Um, and then from there, I would probably maybe go to the aquarium if you're into that. It's a little expensive though. I
People
don't,
love aquariums.
they do. We have a pretty large one right along the water, and it's pretty popular. I grew up going there. I didn't grow up in Baltimore. I grew up mostly in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, but we would always take field trips to Baltimore to the aquarium, and I have a lot of memories there throughout school.
You got any like favorite animals at the aquarium that you like?
Um, they have sloths there.
What are
Which
they?
they have sloths there. There
At
aren't
the aquarium. Wow.
yeah, they have a whole other animal exhibit and they have sloths. The that's probably what I remember the most, apart from, like the sharks and things like that.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So we're going to the aquarium. We got the Peabody Museum. We're going out at Fells Point. Anything else?
Probably visit Fort McHenry, where the Star Spangled Banner was conceived in the water around it.
Oh, wow.
But that's a really important battle site, and that's interesting to go to, in my opinion. As well as I'd say, I don't know. I'd probably go. There's like different parks and things. I'd probably go to. There's Patterson Park, which is pretty prominent. There's another park called Druid Hill that has a big man-made lake. Um, And then from there, there's the art museums, which I may be a little biased because I go to art school, but there's the
How many
um,
art museums are in Baltimore?
there's a couple. Uh, as far as major museums, there's the Baltimore Museum of Art.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite ones. It's kind of the more historic museums. And then as well as the Walters Art Museum, which is another major art museum that's in Baltimore. But I mean, there's so many museums in Baltimore. There's an Edgar Allan Poe house and museum. There's
Oh yeah.
the B&O Railroad Museum. There's a Maryland Science Center. Um, there's historic ships. Babe Ruth was born in Baltimore.
Oh
Uh,
really?
there's the Babe Ruth birthplace and museum as well.
Wow.
um,
Yeah, there's almost what 300 years of history.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of stuff has happened. Yeah, I'm someone who loves going to museums and checking everything out. So the Baltimore Museum of Art, that's probably like the fine art museum, like all
Yeah,
the old Renaissance paintings, stuff like that.
I would say so. Moving from that museum to maybe the Walters Museum of Art, that's also got a lot of that old fine art. But the museums in Baltimore, I've really been pushing to add a lot more newer contemporary art and more
Okay.
representative art, which has been
Yeah.
changing the scene of those museums lately, which is great.
Are there a lot of art galleries in Baltimore?
Oh, what was that? Sorry.
Are there a lot of art galleries in Baltimore?
Yeah. There's a lot of different like hole in the wall areas as there is the art school and art in general is pretty prominent in Baltimore. So pretty much I can't even name one or all of them. There's many
Yeah.
and you can walk down a street and find at least one or two. They're not like New York City where they're these refined art museums. They're more so older buildings that have been renovated enough to hold art in and have exhibitions. And there's some great spaces. One I've been to a couple times is called Current Space, and they host everything from like fashion shows to exhibitions, which is always fun to go to.
That's awesome. I want to switch a little bit over now to photography.
All right,
You got some great photos. How did you originally get interested in photography?
man. I would say I was 12 years old. They have this program called the Student Ambassador Program. I don't know if you've heard of it, or People to People Student Ambassador Program.
Okay.
Um, it's this program started by Dwight D. Eisenhower in order to bring students to other countries to create relationships and share culture and experiences.
Okay.
The program recently ended, which I didn't know about. I
Oh,
believe
really?
2015, I want to say. So it no longer exists, but at the time it did, and I was selected by through my teachers to be nominated to be a part of this ambassador program. I had to fundraise money, and I eventually got to go overseas for 2 weeks at 12 years old to England and Paris. And
Whoa.
yeah,
At 12 years old? That's awesome.
yeah, it was an incredible experience. There's I think 20 of us and maybe a few more. And through that, I was given a point and shoot camera to take pictures. And I was told to come back with lots of good pictures. And through that trip, taking pictures of all the things I saw, I got this passion for capturing images and moments in time.
Wow.
And from there, it kind of just grew. I went to a church at the time who did live stream services and things. And I kind of got brought up as a and mentored on how to use cameras and how to film and edit video. Um, so I have a lot of videography background, but I always had a stronger passion in photography. When I was 14, I started my own photography business, and
Wow.
my mom would take me to craft fairs. She sold Tupperware at the time,
Okay.
so she would let me make a couple prints and bring a table and go with her to these craft fairs and in different art shows and set up at 14 and sell my prints of flowers and barns and things that I would find
Wow.
in
How did
West.
that go? You sell some copies there? Some prints?
Uh, yeah, my first one I ever went to, I almost sold all of the prints I had. Um, it was pretty incredible at the time. I look at it now and I look at the pictures I was selling and I'm like, why did anyone buy this? But I would say through that, I learned a lot and I was able to get a camera, and then I started doing photo shoots. And eventually, when I moved to Maryland, I got into kind of the car community. And I started photographing car shows, cars and car events for a couple years.
So you've shot a lot of different things then.
Yeah, I kind of shoot a little bit of everything. I always say the only thing I don't do is babies.
Okay.
I don't take pictures of babies. It's just not something I want to get into.
Yeah.
But I've always had a passion just for photography in general, and pretty much anything you can take a picture of, I'm all for it.
So what led you to taking photos of abandoned places?
So abandoned places, apart from all of that, has kind of been my obsession, I would say, for the past 5 years. When I was 16, I moved to Maryland. My dad's in the military, so he transferred to a new base. So we moved to Maryland, and I kind of started over. I had grown up pretty much my whole life in West Virginia, all the way, and went to school all the way from kindergarten through my sophomore year of high school. So when I moved to Maryland, I only had 2 years of school left in high school before I would graduate. So I kind of was just looking for something to take pictures of. I always had an interest in old barns and things. So from Google searching, I had found this old asylum not too far from where I lived. And I reached out to a guy I met in school and was like, hey, do you want to go with me and take pictures? Like, I just moved here. So trying to make friends.
Yeah.
We went to this asylum and I immediately fell in love with decay and the stories and history left behind in these different places. The first time we went, we only went in one building out of a 22 building complex. And
Okay.
from there, we just kept going back and then realized there are more places like this. And doing research and seeing the history and things have just created this um, interest of mine in shooting abandoned places.
Okay. So how do you find abandoned places? You said research.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like you're on a treasure hunt. I would put it, you start out on Google and you Google abandoned places in wherever you want to look for abandoned places. And you can start out with a city, a county, something's going to come up. And you kind of just start out with that and end up going down a rabbit hole into, oh, what else can I find? Oh, let me go on Google Maps. Let me zoom into the town and look for buildings that look old or closed.
So it's like Google Earth that you go into and look for
Yeah.
abandoned.
So, I mean, I start with just Google searching. I read a lot of news articles and things, and then beyond that, there's word of mouth. There's a whole community of people who photograph abandoned places. They call it the Urbex community. Um, and then from that, you can use people's YouTube videos that people post and TikToks and Facebook groups. It's just so much to it. Finding an abandoned place is almost, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but you'd be surprised how much we have left behind as a society. And as we keep continuing to expand, we leave these incredible places behind along with their stories and history.
Yeah, I follow the subreddit Urban Exploration on Reddit, and it's one of my favorites. It's so interesting to me.
Yeah, I used to post on there pretty frequently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So how do
Um,
you you get to these places.
Mhm.
Are you ever like, what are you looking for anything? Or are you just walking around and whatever strikes you, you like take a photo of? Like, how, walk me through like your mind as you get to a spot.
I would say probably like my mind also, I would say depends on the spot. Sometimes I know what I'm getting myself into. I have a methodical plan of how I'm going to get in, how I'm not going to get caught by anyone or seen, and how I'm going to go to this room, take this picture in the way that I vision it. But sometimes I don't know what I'm getting into. And I travel a lot with a good friend of mine named Todd. And him and I go to these places kind of blindsided. We're hoping
Okay.
it's something cool, but we may not know exactly. I'm personally, when I'm looking to take an image, I'm looking for something that um, gives the building a sense of place. I'm not really into the whole haunted, spooky house, like
Okay.
gas masks and
Mhm.
the kind of abandoned porn, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Um, I more like the history behind it, the architecture detail,
Okay.
the objects that are left in a space, and how I can capture an image that would convey that space as something that could be revitalized or that once had a life to it that was significant in my
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah. These photos you have are just like really eye-popping. Now, are those color? It seems like there's like monochrome colors. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but like kind of um not bright, and then there'll be like an object or a wall that's just like a totally different color. Is that the editing, or is that what is there?
I mean, I would say, as far as editing goes, I try to make the place look as I see it. I
Okay.
definitely add a lot of light into the places because I want to show everything that's in it. Um, but as far as like color goes, there's a lot of colorful paints used in the older hospitals and stuff, if that's what you're referring to. The state hospitals used to
Yeah.
have these bright green, seafoam green painted
Yeah.
walls. And they don't really paint like that anymore. It's a lot of just white plain walls and yeah.
So of the places you go,
Mhm.
so they're all abandoned. What do you find most of? Schools, hospitals, cinemas, industrial like buildings? What's kind of
Um,
like the breakdown?
I would say it depends where I'm at. Different cities are known for having more of different things.
Okay.
Detroit, for example, is known for its abandoned schools. There's almost 100 of them. It feels like you can park your car and walk so many abandoned schools. And the reason places like that have so many of a certain kind of abandoned place often is because of some type of push for a new start or a
Mhm.
decline in industry or a decline for the need for these buildings. State hospitals, asylums are kind of my favorite. So I do find a lot of those, but I would say it just depends on the area that you're in. If you're in a more industrial heavy area, you're going to find a lot of industrial buildings and things that may be abandoned.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
I
So
don't know.
why
What is-
so why state hospitals? Why is that your favorite?
I feel like they have a really interesting history. We've come a long way in our development of mental health treatment and care, and the things that are left behind. It's this entire complex system that no longer exists anymore. These buildings were supposed to be monuments to mental health which it ended up not being that way. There's a lot of issues with funding and treatment and what people were admitted to these places. I'm just really have an interest in how much complex history there are to so many of these different buildings. I would say that's my kind of gravitational pull to the state hospital.
Yeah, so the schools, like they look like classrooms, schoolrooms, right? And
Yeah,
even auditoriums. But yeah, the state hospitals, the instruments and the objects, it's it's very striking, right? It's very different.
yeah, it's insane to think that, no pun intended, um, crazy to think that these were the this was the equipment at the time, and that's what we used on people to cure them, whether that worked or not. And we've just come such a far way in that sector of treatment. Seeing the old places is almost jarring.
So what kind of, so you're entering these abandoned spaces. Do you feel like you're the only one that has seen this for years, or do you find that there seems to have been activity since it's been abandoned, like graffiti or other random objects that don't seem to belong? Like, what's
Um,
that like?
there it just depends on the place. I mean, there's definitely places I've been to that I wouldn't say I'm the first one there, but maybe the first one to see or take a picture. There's other places that a lot of other people who also like to explore abandoned places have gone, and maybe they moved a chair around, they made a little setup that kind of
Yeah.
pulled their version of what they were trying to photograph. And then I've been in places that have just been completely blown out, covered in graffiti. Maybe someone on YouTube with a lot of subscribers posted a video about it, and it just kind of became a hot spot for, um, I would say, not tourists, but people who have similar interests in abandoned.
The urbex community.
Yes.
Huh.
Um, People who like abandoned places, but maybe not to just photograph them.
Do you have any favorite objects that you always like tend to look for?
Um, I'm a that I like tend to like to capture, or
Yeah, to capture.
I'm a really big fan of medical lights. I like surgical lights. I don't know why. I just always see them, and they're just I just look at them in awe, and I'm just like, wow. They could be like the smallest medical light, and I will still take a picture of it. They're some of my favorites. I've kind of gone through a rabbit hole of power plants recently too, and turbine
Oh,
halls and control rooms are also always really cool to see.
yeah, these photos are pretty stunning. The clock, I like the clock. That looks pretty cool.
Thank you.
Um, how do these places, does it still happen like today? Like if a building closed, like 20 years from now, will it look like one of these abandoned places, or do they demolish them now, or is like
Um,
in the like history, where are we as far as what we do with buildings we don't use?
I would say more so recently we've been pushing to revitalize the buildings, also demolish them.
Oh, okay.
Um, but I've also seen cases where buildings that closed maybe 3, 4 years ago have already become in a state of decay that's way beyond anything I would imagine. So
Oh,
within
wow.
a short time of photographing places, I've been able to see buildings by me close and then become deteriorated over just a short period of time. So I mean, I would just say that it just also depends on the type of place it is, where it's located, and the significance to the property that it sits on. If it's some building in the middle of the mountains, it's probably going to stay that way for a really long time. But larger buildings like this power plant by me that's along the water. As that closed, it was immediately a spot for some developer to buy, to tear down, to build apartments and restaurants and things like that.
Huh. How many states have you gone to take photos?
What was that again? Sorry.
How many states have you traveled to take photos?
Take photos. I've done most of the East Coast. I haven't been to a desert yet, is what I like to say. Um,
Oh, okay.
I've seen everything the East Coast has to offer. Um, I've been to Canada, and as far as that, I'm hoping to change that this summer. When I graduate, I plan on traveling a lot to actually see a desert and actually expand more beyond just the East Coast of the United States.
What's next on the like photography itinerary? Are you taking abandoned place photos elsewhere around the United States and the world, or are you doing a different subject, or what's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll always like photographing abandoned places. That's something that I've become interested in, and I don't really see that as something I might get tired of. Um, I'm trying to travel. Let's see. I do have a couple places in mind that I would like to go to. There's Chernobyl. I don't know if you've heard of that
Oh
before.
yeah, for sure.
That's definitely higher on my list of places. But also,
That's like the holy grail of like
yeah, it
urbex.
is. And it's one place I've really wanted to go to for a long time, but just have never been able to. We had a pandemic, and then I was also
Right.
a lot younger,
Yeah.
and just the idea of going to Chernobyl or traveling to Europe to see all the abandoned chateaus and huge places that have been around longer than the United States. Seeing that is something I've always been really interested in. But I recently started riding a motorcycle, and I plan on going on a trip with my dad and little brother this summer, across the United
Going
States.
out west? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
they
man,
have
it's gonna be
this.
monumental for you.
Yeah, they have this huge bike meetup called in Sturgis.
Sturgis, yeah. I've
Yeah.
been around the area. I went to Deadwood in
Okay.
Rapid City, which is like right out there. I heard a lot about Sturgis.
Yeah. So we plan on just making a trip out of it, going all the way through um, Arkansas and up through Yosemite and Yellowstone, and just seeing all those places. So
Wow.
I'm really excited. I've never been out that way, so I don't really know what to expect, but it's going to be a trip, I would say.
What's the farthest west you've been?
I've been to Texas once when I
Okay.
was 4. I would say that's the farthest west I've been. But
Okay.
I mean, I've been to like St. Louis and all that, but that's more Midwest, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's gonna be cool. It's like every turn you make, it reveals something more gorgeous than what you saw before.
Mhm.
Like the scenery and yeah, that'll be a great trip. In Europe, do they have is there any difference in like the abandoned places? Like do they do anything to like yeah, like what's that scene like compared to the United States? Is it pretty much similar or is it different at all?
I would say from what I've like heard, I don't know because I haven't been yet, but um, as far as like vandalism goes, it's a lot less prominent. More people respect the place as it is. And I
Okay.
think that's something that's a key difference between the United States and Europe. Also, that the places that are abandoned over there are a lot older. The places in the United States, while some have been maybe like abandoned since the 70s, you get a lot of places that are more modern. And over there, things like that just don't exist from what I've been told. Or they do, but there's not too many of them. So I would say just the architecture and stuff over there
So
is
it's going to
just,
be older, probably
yeah,
more ornate and intricate. Uh,
definitely.
oh, that's interesting. So if someone were like starting off in photography, what what steps would you suggest to take just to like get going or get going in a direction?
I would say just to keep taking pictures. Your first, I was told your first 10,000 pictures that you think are good are your worst. And going from that, I would say to just have fun. People tend to take photography very seriously, but
Mm,
if you just take it as for what it is, and that you're just taking images that you like and of things that you find interesting, or people and events, I feel like you can learn a lot from just experience and just going out there and doing it.
yeah. Going out and doing it is probably the best teacher.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, Switching over to like a few other different topics. Music. What are your three what are three musical artists in your like heavy rotation right now you're listening to?
I've been thinking about that. I listen to a lot of different music,
That's what
but
everybody says. It's so common because you have access to
yeah,
everything. So then what are you like really listening to right now?
most recently would be Kanye West's new album, Donda,
Okay.
which I don't know how I feel about it right now. I'm still unpacking it. There's a lot to
That's
it.
a good word to use. Yeah.
Unpacking Donda for all that it claims to be.
Uh-huh.
um, and then, I mean, I listen to a lot of the Suicide Boys when I'm in the car. And then moving from that, I also, I don't know, I listen to a lot of alternative music. I wouldn't say there isn't any specific artists. I really like the early 2000s and 90s alternative um, era.
What are a couple bands from that time?
Um, I would say you have like Rage Against Machine. You have people like Linkin Park.
Oh yeah.
Just those bands and groups like that. I've been kind of diving back into some older groups like Breaking Benjamin and 3 Days Grace.
Very cool.
But
What kind of music is Suicide Boys? Is it like alternative rock as well?
the Suicide Boys, I don't know what they would actually be categorized as. It's kind of this newer, I'm gonna actually look it up because I've never really thought they're considered hip hop,
Okay.
um, but it's definitely more darker in tone. Um, yeah, I don't know. They're different.
Nice.
There's a,
Uh Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a couple different people who kind of have the similar style of them, but
Okay.
they're kind of their own genre and music almost.
That's the best genre.
Yeah.
Your own genre. uh are there three people or things that have influenced your outlook on life the most, whether it's like historical or famous people, books, for photos, photography, films, anything like that?
That was the other question I pondered for a long time. There's so many people who have inspired me in many different ways and have taught me different things about life growing up. Um, as far as like specific people and notable objects and things. Man, that was the one that like really stumped me.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's that's the deep dive question.
It is a deep dive question. So now, yeah, now you can let it marinate a little bit.
Yeah.
Keep it on mind. Um, what's something you're curious about recently?
I've been really curious about like drain systems.
Drain systems. Nice.
I've started taking pictures of them a few years ago. And Baltimore has a really complex drainage system, and there's these huge tunnels made of brick and stone from the early 1900s, late 1800s, and I believe I posted one the other
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. You posted one. Was that yesterday? Yeah.
Yeah. I've kind of been diving into that with a few friends of mine. We have an inflatable kayak, and we will kayak into these outfalls and see where the tunnels lead us to. Um,
Wow.
a whole other community of people who do that, and that's something that's kind of just been an interest of mine lately.
Wow. So you're really going on some adventures.
Yeah,
You live a very adventurous life.
I try to. I really don't like being home. I get really stir crazy,
Yeah.
and I like if I can be out doing something that I may have not done before, or something that's going to give me a new life experience, I am all for it. And sometimes that's a really great way to live life, and sometimes that puts going out and having a great time over doing homework or something like that. But I
Yeah.
would say it's all worth it in the end.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any of those times that I've regretted not doing something, or the decisions I made to go have an adventure.
The best life is one with few regrets or no regrets.
Yes, exactly.
So then you mentioned this trip coming up out west. Is there anything else in the next 2 years you're excited about?
I would say graduating from my school. I'll
Mhm.
be graduating with a BFA in photography, and with that degree, seeing where it leads me to and what career I'm gonna fall into as like not a real photographer, but as an adult and getting a job, and kind of the next stage in life
Yeah.
is coming up for me. And I'm really excited to see where it takes me and what lies ahead. I don't know what it would be. I don't really have any specific tie downs, just kind of seeing where the road goes.
Yeah. That's great to hear, man. Well, you're very talented and you're an awesome person. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Tell listeners and viewers where they can find you and your photos.
You can find my photos on Instagram. My username is at Hall Chris. It's my name backwards. And then also on my website, www.hallchrisphotography.com. If you're trying to buy prints or one of my books or things like that, I have all that on there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks again. Have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me.